This is Professor Correa, and today I am going to teach you how to conjugate and use reflexive verbs in Spanish. But first, let's take a look at how or what are those reflexive verbs. A reflexive verb in Spanish is a verb used to indicate that the subject does something to or for himself or herself. In other words, the action is done to oneself. In a reflexive construction, the subject is also the object. The subject does and receives the action. And the subject, the pronoun used, and the verb must be in the same form. Let's take a look. Here are some examples of how to conjugate the reflexive verbs. A reflexive verb, for example, in the infinitive form always ends in se. In this case, cepillarse, to brush one's teeth. Luis se cepilla los dientes. In this case, se is the pronoun used for Luis. On the second image, we have vestirse or ponerse la ropa, to get dressed or to put clothes on. Él se viste. Él se pone la ropa. Él is the subject, se is the pronoun. How do you form these verbs? You just conjugate it as usual. They're usually irregular or some regular verbs. Let's take a look. Add the reflexive pronoun according to the person who executes the action. Example, levantarse means to get up. You conjugate the verb as it is in present tense, for example. But what you're going to do, you're going to add a reflexive pronoun according to each of the subjects. Me levanto is for yo. Te will be for tú. Se for él, ella o usted. Nos for nosotros. Os for vosotros. Se for ellos, ellas, and ustedes. There are certain stem-changing verbs, so we need to remember that this is a regular conjugation in the present tense. Example, despertarse. This is an E to IE change verb. Despertarse means to get up, to wake up. Me despierto. Vestirse is an E to I stem-changing verb. Visto, to get dressed. Me visto. Another verb, acostarse, changes the O to we. Me acuesto. Certain verbs already have an stem-changing form in the infinitive, like peinarse, to comb one's hair. Me peino. Where to write reflexive pronouns? Keep in mind that since you are conjugating only one verb, the pronoun will always go before the verb. Me acuesto a las 11 de la noche. I go to bed at 11 p.m. In the case that you have two verbs, like in a progressive sentence, you have two options. First option is you attach it to the gerund. In this case, estoy lavándome las manos. I am washing my hands. Notice the me of me is attached to the gerund. Never between the two verbs. And keep in mind, you might need an accent. The second option is before the two verbs. So use me before the two verbs. Me estoy lavando las manos. I'm washing my hands. And the last section explains how to use the reflexive pronouns when you have a form of future with the verb to go. Attach it to the infinitive. Option number 1, voy a levantarme temprano. I'm going to wake up early or get up early. Option number 2, put it before the two verbs. Me voy a levantar temprano. Attention, some verbs can be used as reflexive or as a non-reflexive verb. Verbs not performed to oneself are considered non-reflexive. This sentence, for example, requires two different individuals. These verbs do not require a reflexive pronoun. Usually we use an indirect object. I'm going to explain in a minute. For example, take a look at the verb poner. You can use it as poner or as ponerse. If you use it as poner, you're saying that you're putting it on someone. El papá le pone la corbata al niño. In this sentence, the father puts the tie on the kid. So we are going to use the indirect object pronoun le to indicate that is the boy, the recipient of the action. In the second picture to the right, ponerse is a reflexive verb. Él se pone la corbata. He puts himself the tie. Let's take a look at what happens when you have a reflexive verb and a non-reflexive form. Acostarse means to go to bed, but if you use the verb without the pronoun, it means to put someone to bed. Bañarse will be yourself. Bañar, you will bathe someone, a dog or a kid. Cepillarse versus cepillar. Despertarse, to wake up. Despertar, to wake someone up. The same thing happened with lavarse, lavar, maquillarse, maquillar, peinarse o peinar, sentarse or sentar. So keep in mind that the se will be the characteristic of a reflexive verb. If there is no se, you need to clarify who is the recipient of the action. Some verbs actually will change the meaning if they are reflexive or non-reflexive. In this case, probarse means to try on. Example, él se prueba la ropa. If you use this verb without the reflexive pronoun se, changes the meaning from to try on to taste. El chef prueba la comida. He tastes the food. Another example is quitarse. In the case that is reflexive, means to take off. Ella se quita los lentes. She takes her glasses off. Quitar without the se means to take away. Él le quita la pelota a su amigo. Notice that in this case, we use an indirect object pronoun le to indicate that the other person is the recipient of the action. More verbs that change the meaning. Levantarse means to get up. Él se levanta tarde. Levantar without the se or without a reflexive pronoun means to raise your hand. Ellos levantan la mano. Llamarse, reflexive, you've learned this one as to say to be named. Me llamo Miguel. My name is Miguel. Llamar without reflexive means someone is calling someone else. In that case, we might need to use a clarification. Andrés llama por teléfono a su jefe. Finally, these other verbs change as well the meaning. Dormirse, reflexive, means to fall asleep. El chico se duerme en clase. Dormir just means to sleep. El bebé duerme toda la noche. So let's compare some of the sentences and verbs that we use as reflexive or non-reflexive to English. I'm going to write here some sentences, and I'm going to go over all of them to identify if this is a reflexive or a non-reflexive verb. My mother puts my sister to bed early is correct, a non-reflexive verb form. I'm going to get up early tomorrow is reflexive. We have to bathe the dog today. Correct. That is a non-reflexive verb. My sister is combing her hair now. Yes, that is a reflexive verb. My friends wants to sit in the library. That's a reflexive verb because that they want themselves to sit. I wash the dishes in the kitchen. That is a non-reflexive form, because I am performing the action to something else. So let's summarize what we've learned today about reflexive verbs in Spanish. Reflexive verbs need to use a pronoun when the action is completed by the same person. Example, me lavo las manos. The pronoun always goes first. Reflexive verbs usually refer to everyday routinary actions. If the recipient of the action is not the same person, there is no need for a reflexive pronoun. Example, ella baña a su perro. She washes the dog. Some verbs need attention because they may change the meaning if used as reflexive. Example, me levanto, I get up, versus levanto, I raise. And finally, when naming a part of the body, make sure that you do not use another possessive pronoun. Example, instead of saying me lavo mis manos, use me lavo las manos. Thank you very much.